a serious one.
Yeah.
So joining you live from the World Championship 2023 in Barcelona, the Living Legend podcast.
I was like, yikes, essentially all card draw just got banned in Flesh and Blood. And then I posted the thing, and his immediate response was, is this because of Zen?
Yeah, so he knows kind of what's going on then. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, kinda.
This is pretty much all because of the man in the background here. But I'm recording, so we can crack on straight into this if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So welcome back to the Living Legends podcast. I'm your host for today. My name's Az from Go Again Gaming, and joined by Bill. How's it going, mate? First of all,
it's going pretty crazy.
It is.
my day was pretty good, but we randomly have really big news to talk about. So I'm glad that we've sort of moved to this schedule of filming right before release, because if we still recorded on, like, we used to do it on Saturdays and record on Wednesdays, or record on Saturdays, release on Wednesdays. But if we did that, we would have missed this entirely.
Yeah. We probably would have went on another sort of random barrage of wizard cards, because last week we went on a random barrage of what was being released, right? But
yeah,
it seems like a lifetime ago, and we used to record on Saturday nights, or Saturday afternoons for you, I think.
Saturday afternoons. But yeah, no, this is like the situation that like why we would make this change. To be more on the behind the eight ball, or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. But one thing to note as well is that Kel is not here with us today. Unfortunately, just got some stuff going on outside the podcast, so make sure you send your love and your best wishes in the comments below to him, please. We're just going to be carrying the torch. We've done this a few times, haven't we? And then, you know, when you've not been here, me and Kel have done it. So we're just going to carry on for everyone that listens to us or watches us.
Absolutely.
But speaking of watching us, listening to us, we are on a new platform now. So we are on YouTube. Well, not a new platform, but a new venture. The Living Legends podcast has its own YouTube channel. So you can go over there and subscribe if you haven't done so already. So I appreciate all the audio listeners that have already done that. People that don't necessarily watch us but have gone on there to show support. We're at about 439 as of this recording. And when we reach 500... we're going to be doing a live stream of some description. I think Right Time Gaming has suggested that we do a tag team format battle, which could be quite interesting, because we were speaking about that last week, weren't we? So
yeah,
maybe we can maybe Ian can workshop some ideas where we do a tag team format, just as a
incentives.
Incentives to help us reach other numbers. But yeah, so. Anything interesting happening in your week with regards to Flesh and Blood apart from this article?
No, I haven't really had the opportunity to do anything related to Flesh and Blood. Not recently, at least. I did stop by one of my LGSs last week to drop off actually, now that I think about it, rolling into this article, it feels even worse. I dropped off a care package of just like commons and a couple rares, ninja cards for a new player in our locals. No. And so it was... I couldn't find the red Bonds of Ancestry. I only had one copy, but I gave them that and like Descendant Gust Wave and a couple other things for, as far as I know, the Zen deck, the Katsu deck.
Yeah.
Now like Katsu may be unplayable as a spoiler for what we're going to talk about. So sorry about that, but I'm glad I just gave them to him for free.
Yeah.
That would have felt much worse.
I think obviously we'll get onto this, because obviously we're not going to spend too much time in the fluff today. We're just going to go through the article verbatim. I don't want to sort of taint or sort of morph any words that James has said. I'm just going to read it out, and then we're going to comment on the statement afterwards. So it's going to be mainly that topic today. But yeah, I think all Ninja players are a little bit annoyed right now with regards to what has happened, which we'll get into. which we'll get into very, very shortly here, because that's going to be the main crux of the episode today. But my week hasn't really been exciting either. Just been doing more content-based stuff for the League That Means Nothing, which is now in round 5. Round 4 is going to be televised soon. And we're starting to get to the top tables, the top echelons of that now. So the content is going to be slower, but the games are going to be more meaningful to a certain degree, because it means that they could be deciding top 8 or whatever. Even though the league means nothing, it could mean something to the people that are in that top 8, which I don't think is going to be me or you. That's for sure. But there we are.
No, it may be the league that means nothing, but man, I got a lot of money riding on these games.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
So much cash. But yeah, apart from that, another thing which I did do this week, I was sorting out some cards for one of my friends who's an illusionist player. So once was playing a lot of Dromai before, obviously she LL'd, and now wants to get into Prism. So I basically went up into my loft where all my extra things are, because I'm still living at my parents' house until maybe next year or the year after. And went up into the loft and dug some cards out. And in my sort of bulk box, where all of my sort of Monarch old school cards were a playset of the old Herald of Protection promos that we were given as content creators back in 2021.
Oh yeah, I saw you post about that.
Yeah. So when I got those back in the day, I was just giving them away willy-nilly. You know, I had no idea what the value might be 3 years later and all of this. So, you know, back in the day, I was just giving them to everybody, you know, because I was like 50 to 100 subscribers when maybe I think I was between 50 and 100 subscribers when I got them. You know, that just goes to show how much things have grown since then. So yeah, I was just giving them away willy-nilly, and I kept a playset for myself, which is in my memories box, which I might have mentioned on the channel before. Got like a little box which is full of memories, like the Yorick and stuff that you got me, and that. No, the Go Bananas is what you got me.
Yes.
So Go Bananas, Yorick, loads of other little bits that we've procured from our journeys and travels. I've got a playset of all the LSS promos that have ever been sent to me in that box. But then I randomly found a playset of Heralds that were in the Illusionist section of my bulk box. So I was just looking through, and I was like, so Rob's going to need some of these Heralds of Protection. Hold on a sec, there's a playset of promos here. Okay then, 3 years later, it's like Cash in the Attic, like a British show in the UK called Cash in the Attic, where people go into their loft and just get stuff out. But I was like, you know, illusionists love their bling. Illusionists love, you know, kitting out their heroes. So I just thought, why not? You know, I'm going to Japan, so, you know, does anybody want to buy these from me? And someone did. So someone is a very, very lucky person now with 3 play sets of each Herald of Protection, and they're helping me as well. It's all coming round full circle, helping me go to Japan and survive out there, because it's obviously quite expensive to get there. So I appreciate the person for doing that. But yeah, just thought I'd tell that story as well.
Yeah, no, that's a huge win. I had no idea that they were that expensive. I guess probably because they were just from so long ago.
Yeah.
But like, they're more expensive than the Judge Wartune Heralds by like a solid, like they are 50% more expensive than Judge Wartune Heralds. That's crazy. That's a great find. I'm glad that you were able to find those, because that definitely helps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, you know, they were given to us back in the day. You know, the article says you can use these for whatever you want, generating revenue, helping build your channel. There is an article on there from LSS that says you can do these things with your promos, right? But back in the day, I was just giving them away. You know, you were giving them away in Barcelona as well, if I remember correctly. Was it those or the good deeds? Good deeds, I think.
It was the good deeds. But yeah, speaking of cards that are still like extremely expensive.
Yeah. So I gave all those away as well. Good deeds.
Yeah. I think I gave away pretty much all of them. I thought I had given away all of them, and I think there were a few left that were just like in a different box or something when I got back. But yeah, it's nice to be able to give those away, and it's even nicer when they're like something that is worth something. I don't know. It just feels cooler to be like, hey, this is worth $50, but you know, just for you.
Just take it.
You can have that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just want to thank that person. Not sure whether they're listening to this. Wojan from Poland. He actually played in the Worlds versus Barcelona football match, and the guy's a neurosurgeon. So he's got the money to spend on these things because he's got an extremely amazing job. Neurosurgeon. How smart do you have to be to do that? Holy hell. But yeah, so just wanted to tell that little story of things coming round full circle, which is going to be nice to sort of enjoy in Japan. Yeah, so we're going to go straight into a couple of comments from last week's episode, and then we're going to go into the banned and restricted. Whoops. Now, people know what it is by now. People know what the
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think every single person that's listening to this probably heard the news one way or another.
Yeah, I think there's live streams going on right now of content creators saying, "Oh my god, look at this!" Well,
I mean, even the Flesh and Blood website got hug of death a little bit. Right after it came out, like I was trying to access it, and I just couldn't. It was just timeout error. I was like, okay, cool, something big just happened.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because I typed in it, I clicked on it. It was like bad gateway error 502 or something. You couldn't get on it. Yeah, just a couple of comments from last week. Again, if you want to get the chance of having your comment read out, then just leave a comment on each week's video, and we'll try and skim read through them. First of all, we've got Indoor Adventures saying, wanted to give shout out to Red Zone Rogue. Obviously, he's not here as well, so I thought I'd read this one out. Wanted to give a shout out to Red Zone Rogue for next week. Almost a year ago, I was looking at a new TCG to get into after falling out of love with other card games, and it was because his appearance on Tolarian Community College that I got into Flesh and Blood in the first place. Here's to 1,000 subs on the Living Legends podcast YouTube channel, and keep up the great work. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. But how did you get into Fab? What's your story with that?
It was through a friend of the Spike Feeders and personal friend of mine, Olivia Gobert Hicks.
Oh yeah.
Wasn't her directly, but it was just that we had seen, because she's a cosplayer and a very, very talented cosplayer.
Yep.
We had seen, and she had told us that that Flesh and Blood, that Legend Story Studios was just treating their cosplayers really, really well. She was invited to go to, I forget what major event it was, but she was going to be cosplaying Prism. And for reference to help her out with making her cosplay, they sent her a bunch of promos and cold foils and stuff. And she looked it up, and she was talking to Jim about it, and she was like, yeah, they sent me it was $2,000 US worth of promos. And then in addition to that, I think, I don't know, they were just giving her a bunch of cool stuff. And full disclosure, this was also before the Spike Feeders had been noticed by Wizards of the Coast. Really, we were just making content for the fun of making content, which is a totally fine thing to do.
Yeah.
But we hadn't been acknowledged by Wizards of the Coast at that time. So the prospect of a card game company caring about their content creators as deeply as that was really interesting. Mm-hmm. So then I tried it out, and even though I don't play the game in person very much right now, I still do think that the Flesh and Blood system, the actual rule set, is extremely solid. I think that it's really cool. It's very intriguing. Yeah, so that's basically it. I found out about it through a content creator friend, and then gave it a shot, and it was very, very good. I also then basically immediately pulled an Arknight shard before I even knew what Fableds were.
Yeah. It's a gem. Okay, yeah. What is this, a land or something?
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is cool. I don't play Viscerai though, so.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Yeah. How about you though? How was you started during Monarch? I know that.
That's right. Yeah. So Monarch was just being released when I sort of discovered it. I discovered it through Tolarian Community College as well, where Professor released a video about how to play or something. There was just a video saying, "Oh, check out this new card game." So I was like, "Yeah, all right then." I was following a lot of Magic content at the time, working in a warehouse job, listening to a lot of podcasts, and consuming a lot of Command Zone. Because I was playing a lot of Commander back then, and it's something I do want to kind of pick up again. Because I played with my friends over the last couple of weeks or so, and remembered how fun it is. Even though I've only got the one deck now, And it's a combo deck, believe it or not, which is quite funny for people that know me for Flesh and Blood. It's a combo deck I play in Magic, which is funny. But yeah, so I just wanted to explore new things during lockdown and COVID when we were all sort of stuck in our houses, not being able to do anything, feeling down and wanting to explore other things while we can. And, you know, being a geek and being a nerd is a fantastic way to explore other worlds and environments and characters and all this sort of thing. So I was like, yeah, Flesh and Blood, this is cool. I like Commander. I like, you know, hero-centric games, and I can really identify with... At the time, it was also Viserai. I could identify with Viserai because I liked these sort of dark, brooding, warlock sort of type characters with dark magic. So yeah, just really got into it from there, and lo and behold, we're talking about it 3 years later on this podcast. So must be pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
but yeah, so maybe we can ask Cal next time about how he got into it as well, because I'm not sure entirely how he came across it back in 2019 or 18 or something, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for him, but yeah, he's been here since like the beginning. He's been here the whole time, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, part of the furniture.
Like one of his favorite stories is that he found a box of alpha on eBay for like $50 or something stupid. Like,
yeah, that's right.
And then pulled a cold foil tunic out of it. Like, okay.
yeah, exactly. Love and life. But yeah, thanks for the comment, Indoor Adventures. That's obviously sparked some memories in us, and yeah, we'll hear from Kel next time as well with regards to the story there. Tam Kablam is saying, I would love to see the D&D campaign, Fab D&D campaign come back, please. I felt like it was getting good with the story and the character development. Also, what's in the box? What's in Honor's box? Yeah. Funnily enough, that has been discussed, hasn't it, recently?
Yeah, we do have some discussion going on in the background. Obviously, Kale is just a busy person, so they're working pretty hard on that. But yeah, I mean, especially with the quality of the campaign that we had when we were going through it, that first, it was supposed to be a one shot, but it ended up being so much longer.
3 episodes, yeah.
With the quality of it as it was, I'm so willing to wait.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know that their life is pretty busy, but I know that it will be good, whatever it ends up being. So
yeah, Kale does make some fantastic storyteller in general. So yeah, keep sort of your eyes peeled for that. And you know, the actual cover art of the Living Legends podcast is actually the characters that are involved in that campaign as well, drawn by Sam Yang, who was also on the podcast at one point. Do you remember that? When it was like 3 hours long and he was drawing our characters.
That was so cool.
It was.
I actually like think back to that whenever I see, you know, like art as I'm scrolling on Twitter or whatever. The fact that he was able to like come up with it while talking to us, like it was so casual. He was just like, yeah, whatever, and he's like sketching this out, and it's just like the most fantastic like character sketch art that I've ever seen in my life.
The fact that your character was holding a box and then suddenly like the gauntlet was forming around the arm. And it's just like, wow, this is ridiculous imagination.
So cool.
But yeah, hopefully that will return with those characters. I think Kel was going to be playing a new character. We were still going to be our own characters, because I think there was a lot more story with our characters. There was a lot of sort of enigmatic sort of energy from your character because we just didn't know what was going on. And then my character story was just like a driving force. I'm trying to find something. I'm trying to do something. So those two bits together, I think, were pretty sick. So hopefully we explore more of that. Just a couple of responses in reference to last episode was Flesh and Blood is an anime card game now. People saying this is a great move. People love the art style on that. People saying, "Oh, where's the problem?" There is no problem in anime. It's fantastic. It brings in a lot more culture into the game as well, because different art styles and different sort of visualizations from different areas of the world. And that's pretty much it, really. And someone else saying, "Ham man, after all these spoilers, get your AB ready because Kano is eating good." I had some ideas of what this podcast could have been called if it wasn't due to the announcement that we're going to go into, and it could have been something like everything is now Zap, because there's a load of 0 for 3s now, isn't there? in the wizard slot.
Yeah, I'm like pretty certain that there's. Well, I mean, I think I saw a list that somebody put together that is literally just every playable card is a zap.
That's it.
Because
Yeah.
there's like 30 of them.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff now, but you know, with a few cards that have been banned, which could affect Kana. I think one does. One does definitely affect Kana, isn't it? So we'll go into those in a second. Well, in fact, now actually, I've got the announcement up. So are you ready to go into this, Bill?
Yeah, I think so. It is a bit of a longer post, but that actually does speak to the fact that it is quite thoughtful. Like this isn't just a knee-jerk reaction. There and like the little bit of a spoiler, they kind of go back to like the sort of core tenets of what makes Flesh and Blood,
Yep.
and compare that to where they are now. And so I think that's a really useful insight.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's dive straight in.
Absolutely. So I'm going to try and read this as quickly as possible, and I'm going to try and not change any of the words, just because it's James' words, and he is the CEO and obviously the creator of this game. So we'll just speed through it, but you can go and read it now on the articles section. So you can even follow along if you want to follow along with us, wherever you might be out there, big wide world, watching or listening to this. So this is from today. This was an hour and a half ago when we're recording this, when this was released to the world, and it was so clicked on that it crashed the website, as you said earlier.
Yep.
We
hug of death.
couldn't access it because so many people were choking the server, essentially. But yeah, this is from James White himself, and a lot of people were speculating, like, you know, if there's an announcement from James White, you know, the head honcho of the company, it's going to be a big thing, and it is. So this October, Flesh and Blood celebrates its 5th anniversary, and over that time, we've released 14 sets containing over 3,000 unique cards, with another 3 sets finished and in production that release in 2025. And it's been an incredible journey to see FAB grow into a global game loved by fans around the world. And this article was originally intended to be published as part of a 5th anniversary content running during October. And after further reflection, we think it's the best interest of fans to publish this prior to Rosetta world premiere, so the new format can be evaluated with clarity from the get-go fans that can make informed decisions when acquiring cards for the Rosetta season, and that makes sense because we don't want that. We don't want, you know, Zen and, you know, the all that sort of inevitability shadowing over the upcoming Rosetta new heroes and what the meta could be without that looming over it, right? So
Yeah,
that definitely makes sense.
It's definitely something that people were concerned about. That you know, as much as they could reveal and release cards that are sweet within Rosetta, right now MST is just so overpoweringly strong. Like all 3 of the heroes, it's basically like Tales of Aria 2.0.
Yeah,
they're just so impactful, especially Zen. So the fact that was just sort of right there in the background kind of the whole time, it's like, okay, we're looking at all these cool cards that Verdance gets access to, but how do they deal with Zen dealing 65 damage in a turn? Like, they don't, right? So
exactly. And that's a good.
So it's good that they've, like you said, come forward with it early.
Yeah, and that's a good prefix to why they're doing this, because we'll get to it later on, but it's the extreme offensive output is how they sort of go over it, which is in bold letters on the article, which we'll get to, but it is extreme offensive output where it's not interactable, essentially.
Yep.
Which is what we've mentioned in the past, but we'll carry on. So prior to Flesh and Blood's release date on October 11th, 2019, so 2 years before I got into it, and 2 years for you as well, I believe. So it's been around for 2 years before we got into it. We spent years designing and developing the innovative game system, which you said earlier, which we all know about today. Our learnings from this initial creation phase and the formative years post-release pale in comparison to what we know today due to years of more of internal play and from observing many exceptional TCG minds around the world push the game system and its pieces to their limits. Now, this was always going to happen. They designed a fantastic principle for a game, but as soon as you get that out to the world, there's going to be people that want to break it and do absurd things of it, and that's what's happened to a certain degree.
Absolutely. It's something that we even talked about when we had James White on the podcast. Like, there are cards that were released in Welcome to Wraith that you probably couldn't print today, that are just too strong. Like, having, if now all of a sudden you got something on the level of Fate Foreseen as a defense reaction, people like it would be too strong. They haven't printed like an unrestricted 0 for 4 defense reaction basically since Arcane Rising, because they printed it right after with Fate Foreseen. But yeah, Sink Below is just like the de facto, like, this is a good defense reaction. So printing things around that becomes difficult. But yeah, like printing cards into a card game without knowing how it's really going to be played can lead to some sort of some hallways that end up narrowing. You kind of paint yourself into a corner.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that you always compare the new thing to, isn't it? You're always like, oh, okay, I might as well just run Sink Below or Fate Foreseen, and every class can access it. Continual learning and improvement are one of my personal lifelong disciplines. This is what James is saying, of course, and a core internal value of Legends Story Studios. I also believe that learning and improvement requires self-reflection. That's very true. As we approach our 5th anniversary, it's time to reflect on where we are and act on what we've learned about the strengths and vulnerabilities of our game system, so fans may continue to play great games for the next 5 years and beyond. And this is something, just that statement on the end there, is something that we very much have respected from the get-go as well, with regards to the transparency and quite sort of ballsy approach to be like, yeah, okay, we made a mistake. We can now ban all of these cards, which we are going to get to in a moment. But yeah, you've said that countless times, that it's just something that's quite refreshing, even from a company perspective.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, pretty much every episode that we have, I reference back to Magic the Gathering in some capacity. And for people who have been paying attention in the Magic the Gathering space, there's a card currently that well, I guess very, very recently, a little bit too late, a card called Nadu just got banned. And Nadu was like just unbelievably toxic for tournament play. It was like the worst aspects of a dirtily combo deck and like deterministic, way too fast, hard to interact with. It was just everything. It like sucked, and it took way too long for Wizards to do literally anything about it. People were complaining so hard, and it took until now when Modern Horizons released like. My timeline is a little bit skewed, but I think like 3 months ago, and it's been a problem the whole time. Like it never wasn't a problem. So the fact that like this is kind of, I mean, it's kind of reactionary with how Zen is, but it's also looking forward to the future and being like, hey, this is spoilers, this is a big correction that they're doing.
Yeah.
But I do agree with a lot of the things that they say in this. And that one, like you're saying again, like the transparency is really good. I do want to make sure that regardless of what people have to say about the decision, the fact that they're being transparent about it is very nice.
Yeah, exactly. And they're doing what they believe is best for the players and the game at large. So, revisiting the Flesh and Blood design principles. So when FAB launched back in 2019, we sent local game stores across the world a welcome kit that included a booklet stating the Flesh and Blood design principles. That would have been nice to see if anybody still has that booklet lying around. That's quite cool. And this is a section from the booklet. So this is a nice little screenshot on the article, and it says design principles. So number 1 is start full. Now this is one of the things that the professor said in his video that I watched when I very, very first got into the game, and it's and the statement here is the start full game system simulates heroes coming to the fight at their full strength and their strongest and wearing down over the course of battle. Action starts fast and furious from turn 1, but players will be challenged with the new concepts of card management in order to master the end game. So yeah, that was something that the professor said in his video as well. And obviously, I've never seen this design principles thing before. It's nice for them to sort of release this. But yeah, you start at your strongest. You've got all your equipment on board. You've got all your cards available in deck, and you can just go off straight away. But then as the game goes on, you start losing your equipment. You start seeing your power cards go to the graveyard after using them. You then have to sort of really think about how you're going to sort of progress in that end game. Which is a fantastic thing to sort of explore. But they go into, after we read out these design principles, they go into how some of those design principles have eroded or changed over the course of the last sort of 5 years or so. But yeah, you agree with that, don't you? You like the start full sort of thing, coming into battle at your strongest.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it kind of works with something that they talk about in the next section as well. Kind of ties into the fact that the resource system allows players to start like full. Like you have a really good first. You start as strong as you are ever going to be, essentially. Outside of like, maybe you could argue that like Teklevossen kind of gets stronger as the game goes on, but that's like his whole game plan. That is what it is centered around. You are building up to the singularity. You are building up to a full set of evos. You are like, and that's really cool. It's kind of a diversion. It's a subversion of the design philosophy in a way that doesn't break the game, but. Yeah, the idea that like you can have your power cards, you can use them basically on turn one a lot of the time, but if you misuse them, then you have lost them for the remainder of the game, and you have to be mindful about like finding your spots and using your cards to the best of their potential, because the games can go so long that you end up fatiguing, you end up running out of cards. And I think that is a really cool design. A really cool aspect of design that they've like sort of zeroed in on, and like they're like, this is a feature of the game. Like you have access to everything right at once, but that doesn't mean that you immediately win. It means that you have to sometimes pace it out.
Take your time and pick your spots. Exactly. Yeah. So take your time and pick your spots. And what we're going to do now as well, I've just realised that there's a little bit on each one below this. We're going to read out the principle and then read out the rebuttal to that, which is below. So the rebuttal to start full is: this holds true, but is no longer a functional principle. Instead, it is a statement of fact about how the Flesh and Blood game system works. So that was the statement after the design principle. So the second one is reduce variance. So FAB introduces a completely new resource system to the TCG industry. Obviously, this is the booklet that was sent to new game stores pitching the game. 100% of FAB games are interactive. Each turn of every game, every turn of every game plays can be made to progress the game state. And then the rebuttal is the innovative pitch system that FAB introduced to the TCG industry continues to uphold the original intent of this design principle. From the first turn of the game, players are guaranteed access to the game system's base resources required to play, compared to other game systems that load variance onto the ability of players to access base resources, like lands in Magic. You have to draw them in order to play your cards. Often when a player lands on the wrong side of this card of variance, they don't get to meaningfully engage in the game, and that still holds true, I believe. The pitch system is still fantastic because you can always do something with your cards. You're not sort of land screwed or mana flooded, etc.
Yeah, like sometimes you can have bad turns. Like you're never going to have the perfect hand every time for what you want to do. But then the fact that you don't just have like, if you go to your turn and you have a hand full of 4 cards and you can't do anything meaningful, then I think that's a fundamental design mistake for the deck that you've created. In Flesh and Blood, if you're allowed to have 4 cards, you can usually do something pretty good. And I think that that's really interesting, and again, like a fundamental part of the game. Getting mana screwed, like not drawing lands or drawing too many lands in Magic feels very bad, because you can't really skill your way out of that. But with Flesh and Blood, you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to aggressively take some more damage so that I can retain these cards so that I can then push the advantage that way. I think that that's, on the whole, it is more meaningful and more interactive than like exactly what they're saying than just getting varianced out of a game entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And as they say here as well, just carrying on from that, so not all variance is bad, and in fact I believe variance plays an important and positive role in game design. However, variance that results in players failing to meaningfully engage in the game is what I consider negative variance. This is often referred to as agency or lack thereof. FAB's pitch system solved this from a resource system perspective. It continues to function as a standout feature of the Flesh and Blood game experience. I agree with that. However, loss of agency has crept into Flesh and Blood in other ways, and at levels that we view as being undesirable for the long-term health of the game. That definitely has crept into it, where you can just have these turns where none of those cards in your hand matter, because you're being presented with too much at a certain point, or the cards that you're getting in return to cheating other cards out, which draw you more cards, which then extend that even further, especially when you're playing aggro. It's just too much for what your opponent's hand equates to, and that's sort of opposite to the Flesh and Blood card for card they go into it in the reward good decisions section in a moment. So I'll touch on that again when we get to it. Number 3 is every card counts. During the course of most games, you will see every card in your deck at least once, so make sure they all count. So this is cute because they like to think you'll see every card in your deck at least once, but that's not necessarily the way it goes most of the time, especially at the moment where games CC is just ending so quickly at the moment. So the rebuttal to that is, for the most part, this principle holds true. It is an archetype. It is archetype and/or matchup dependent, but that has been the case for a long time. We don't see every game getting to second cycle as a mandatory requirement to satisfy this principle, but we do want second cycle decks to be a meaningful part of the metagame. So yeah, again, at the moment we don't really see that second cycle much because the games are ending too quickly. But what's your thoughts on that sort of thing? Because that lends itself then into, are they designing to fatigue your opponent, or they want to design around getting your opponent to 0?
Yeah, I think they want it to be at least a gameplay option. It feels like they're saying, like, not every game needs to go to second cycle, but the games that do go to second cycle, the players that are able to meaningfully play into it and use it as an advantage and leverage that, it should still be like good. It should be something that doesn't necessarily, like, it's not just the game has gone long and now some other stuff is happening. It's like, okay, you have played well enough to survive into this late game, and if you've been paying attention and pitch stacking correctly, then you can still like have an advantage. You have you've weathered the storm of your opponent's deck. They've used all their power cards, and now yours are all coming up in perfect hands of 4 basically. So yeah, I think they're looking to make it still an option, but not that it has to be mandatory that you have to see every card in your deck, which I think is also like, that would be awkward for tournament play if every single game was like, okay, you go through your entire deck. Some of those could be pretty miserable.
Very long and grindy.
Yeah, but they also don't want to invalidate second cycle, which I think is fair.
But yeah, what I like about the heroes that we're seeing in Rosetta is that they're stapling on a second cycle to your hero's ability. So they're saying, right, okay, if you filled your graveyard, if you filled your banish zone, if you've got the decompose mechanics going and stuff, if you've got all these cards in your banish zone, then all of your other cards in some shape or form, or your hero at large, is just better, because your second cycle is just, your deck is designed around taking that time to sort of fulfill another zone so that all your cards get the extra buff. So I like the way that they're going with the potential addressing of second cycle or longer sort of format decks. With like Verdance or Verdance. People are getting very annoyed about the pronunciations. So I'm just going to say Verdance. Yeah, Verdance, isn't that? I think it is Verdance, isn't it? That's the way you pronounce it.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was funny. But yeah, those heroes, I think the way they're designing them and giving them sort of an ability to play the game at a slower pace by rewarding you for fulfilling criteria, I think is an interesting way to go with the longer format decks. But yeah, so, and then the last principle is reward good decisions, not good luck. So victory is earned through the accumulation of many good decisions. FAB is not a game where you can slam a dragon and ride it to victory. Well, I'm not sure how accurate that is with Dromai and
yeah, they've kind of changed that.
They've kind of changed that, yeah. This was released in the booklet before Draconic was probably thought of, but before Dragons existed. And then the rebuttal to that is a game of Flesh and Blood is intended to be won from the incremental advantages gained through the accumulation of many good decisions. We don't see the current state of the game having a problem with rewarding good luck, but rather than the accumulation of many good decisions is too frequently being undermined by extreme offensive overlaps. So this is what we touched on earlier, is the extreme offensive overlaps. Doesn't matter what decisions you make over the course of the last 2 turns. If Zen gets the combo turn, Art of War, Stride of Reprisal, then all of those decisions, all those macro things that you've done in the last 10 minutes of the game, let's say, are made irrelevant by this one big turn, which is just the cards that they've got access to are too much for your 4-card or even 5-card hand plus equipment. I think we read out a Yuki Lee Bender comment on maybe a few episodes ago, where it doesn't matter how much she had out, it doesn't matter. The agency was lost in that game from Zen.
Yep.
So yeah,
it's tough when most of the deck design and card design up to Zen specifically has been sort of with this in mind of having incremental advantage. Pressing percentage point, sort of this is going to be good in a few turns, those types of decisions. I always thought that was a really interesting part of playing Flesh and Blood as well. Like you can have a really solid turn, and that can push, that can like flip the tempo essentially. But largely in Flesh and Blood, if you are playing sort of more heads up than your opponent is, if you're able to make those decisions or sort of throw them off their game, you actually do have like a higher percentage chance of being victorious.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been saying for a while as well. Like if you had 2 people that were playing either the same deck, or you had like an inexperienced person playing a really expensive, highly tuned deck versus an experienced person playing a cheaper or less optimized deck, largely, I would say, like, I don't think that the experienced person wins 100% of the time, because that variance still does exist and cards are strong. Like, strong cards are strong for a reason. But I do think that the experienced person is able to press advantages that the other player maybe can't see as well.
Yeah.
And I do think they have an over 50% win rate against, even if their deck is wildly outclassed. I think that experience and knowledge and pressing advantages makes a huge difference in this game. So the fact that has kind of flipped, and now there are power turns that don't just flip tempo, they end the game. That's a little bit tough to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're alluding to there goes on to the next part of the statement. But what I'll add just before that is, I remember Tommy Fresh saying something during the heavy hitters meta. I think it was maybe a tweet or one of the podcasts he does, but he said, if there's a meta that allows me to play Dorinthia Axes, then that's good. Because we saw, was it Maximilian? I can't remember what his name is, but he got all the way to the end of Pro Tour, the last one. Was it LA? Not the last one, the one before, on Dory Axes, and he faced off against Arthur Trehey on the Dromai, which Sigil won the Pro Tour. He was on a Dory Axes list, and it was just a grindy mathematical deck where you were just extracting every piece of resource and value out of your cards to win the game. That's basically what he was trying to do on that list. And Dory Axes, proved to be one of the most resource efficient and damage efficient decks out there at the time. And in the heavy hitters meta, with KO running around and, just pure numbers and pure math, that was one of the best things to do at the time, because Dory has a fridge and, can consistently do that sort of thing. But could also be argued as one of the reasons why they also don't want to rely on that system too much, because it just becomes games of math. And going into this next part here, at its simplest level, Flesh and Blood is a game of 4-card turn cycles, because you're accessing 4 cards each time. Each turn, you're getting 4 new cards. How do you extract the value out of it? So carrying on from that, I just added some little bits in there, where each player is looking to come out ahead after smashing their 4 cards against their opponents. The quest that we offer players is how to break this dynamic, which is where they add in different themes and flavours and tigers and cheese and all of that sort of stuff. The Arsenal is also the simplest example of how we enable players to set up game states that create 5 versus 4 card offensive overlaps. And of course, the defending player has a defense reaction in Arsenal, then it's a parity of 5 versus 5, etc. And equipment is another way to ratchet up your offensive and defensive virtual hand size. But yeah, what do you think on that? Because again, if it just becomes 4 cards versus 4 cards, or 4 cards versus 5 cards, it becomes very mathematical. But then that's where they chuck in the flavor and the differences here and there, I guess. But
yeah, it's the difference between saying this is how the game is played and this is the playground that you have. They are sort of very fundamentally different, even just like game design ideas, where instead of Flesh and Blood saying, okay, you have 4 cards, those 4 cards are what you have access to on your turn. You use those in some combination to attack your opponent, and they can either block or then use their 4 cards to attack your 4 cards. It's basically like that way the game fundamentally like boils down to like I have a bunch of wounding blows or whatever. Like I just have this 0 for 4, and it's like, okay, how many of these should I put in my deck? Blah blah blah. But you know, that's where another fundamental part of Flesh and Blood, just the idea of go again, already breaks that sort of idea. Where in that framework, something like Guardian becomes the best because it's like, okay, well, if I only have 1 action point, I might as well make it worth 10 damage. You know, I have a bunch of blue cards in my deck that then allow me to play this big thing, and that's the one thing that I do on my turn. But giving go again means that you can go wider, and that's already like a variation on the theme here. So, yeah, being able to then work with the confines that you've been given, and like he's saying, sort of give you a quest to break the parity that is inherently given to you. That's interesting. That's a really interesting way to interact with a game because it's extremely active. It gives you, like they were saying, a lot of agency where you can do things like, and I harp on it every time, this aggro prism deck, it's not good, but it's fun. And it's like, it's changing what people sort of inherently think of for Flesh and Blood. Where again, it's like you're giving something go again that shouldn't have go again. You're making this blue snatch actually hit for 9 and draw 2 cards, or like stuff like that. Like it's you're changing the fundamental values of the game, and that's interesting. But it seems as though they're admitting here that they've ratcheted it a bit too much, and you know, and then that's not interesting either, because then if people aren't explicitly subscribed to that level of game knowledge and they're building their decks, you know, sort of around the fact that Zen does 60 damage, then the people who aren't subscribed to that are just inherently at a disadvantage. And like we were saying, game knowledge is really cool, but if you're prejudiced on turn 0, that sucks. That feels really bad.
Yep, absolutely. And following on from that, so it's always been our intention to offer players these ways to create offensive overlaps, like you were saying. So the majority of games end with a hero being reduced to 0 life rather than 0 cards, which is another point we addressed earlier in deck. So as of late, offensive overlaps have just become too extreme and too frequent, which you've mentioned already, to the point where the principle of achieving victory through the accumulation of many good decisions and value has been eroded, which is, again, something we touched on already. The most egregious culprits are, in bold writing, cards that immediately net additional cards without costing an action point, or are playable by heroes that are easily able to generate or bypass action points. So yeah, just the offensive, out of hand offensive overlaps, and especially when we go back to the previous statement of 4 versus 5 card hands. That just doesn't matter anymore when, you know, when you can just do Art of War, cheat the cost, you know, come in, combo, you know, when Bonds was a thing as well. It's just, there's too much going on there. You're also devaluing your opponent's attack by blocking with Traverse and essentially drawing a card. There's all these things going on with Zen, which is why he's in the background of this video here, because he's the main culprit.
Yeah.
That they're sort of changing here. Any thoughts on that before I move on to the next statement, round this section off?
I think it's just speaking to something that I've just kind of known in the back of my mind about Flesh and Blood for the longest time. Drawing cards has always been like the most impactful thing that you can do in this game, because your cards just do so much.
Yep.
Like even the fact that Sink Below is like technically it's card selection, it's not card draw, but even then getting access to a different card is great. things like Art of War, things like a lot of the other cards that we're going to be talking about in just a second, are what they're supposed to be, card selection. They are like, you use this card and then another card to then draw 2 cards. So you've replaced the 2 that you used with 2 new ones, and that's it. You're like a little bit more positive on it, like with something like Art of War, you have an attack buff or whatever. But it's all supposed to be like card selection. You're supposed to go like neutral in the exchange. You remain at 3 cards or whatever it is. But yeah, drawing an additional card on your turn is crazy, because then you have access to either another attack or more resources, or it's like the same reason why Plunder Run is so strong. It's the same reason why Minnowism Belittle is such a good combo, because that's kind of, it's not only drawing a card with Belittle Minnowism, it's drawing a specific card from your deck. It is tutoring a card, so it's better than card draw.
And it's a resource.
Yeah, anyway,
you can change your resources with it as well. So it's just,
exactly. Yeah. Like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
too excited about this.
Yeah, but you're getting at card draw and that's the thing. It's when it's comboed with the offensive aggro decks that can then just push that envelope too far. Is when your hand of 4, 5 cards becomes, and your armor again in some cases, like Yuki said before. Doesn't matter what you've got on your hands. Doesn't matter what armor you've got on. You just die to the combination of these things, and it's happening way too much. So just to cap off this part here, there are many ways you can view and quantify agency in a game. Arguments can be made that effects such as Red in the Ledger, Warmonger's Diplomacy, Siren's Call, Arclight Sentinel, Ward Board States, and even Dominate are examples of diminished agency. However, there is a massive difference between effects that diminish or restrict agency and the topic at hand, which are, again in bold, extreme offensive overlaps that result in a player being reduced to 0 life. There is no greater loss of agency than the game ending from the forces that a player had no reasonable way to interact with, and this is the most extreme loss of agency that we're looking to temper. So again, just touching on points that we've said already, and the article at large here, Flesh and Blood should be a game of these back and forth hands that are accumulating you value over the course of a game from meaningful decisions, but it doesn't matter how many meaningful decisions you make up until the point where Zen Art of War traverse, you're dead. That's it. So yeah.
There's just a huge fundamental difference between like, I'm even playing against Starvo. Like Starvo was very consistent in what it did, which made it, worse in terms of like a game design aspect. It was a very strong deck. It still is in Living Legend, but there's a difference between very consistently doing like, 10, 15 damage and having interaction and having defensive options with things like Crown of Seeds. When on your turn that you're attacking with this and your opponent is defending against it's like 15 damage split over 2 attacks, for example.
Yep.
The amount of defense that they usually have access to during that turn is, let's say 3 cards, or let's say they have 4 cards in their hand that each block 3, that's 12. And then say they have even just the base 1 block on each piece of equipment. So they have access to like 16 block. If they wanted to, if they felt like this was like the highest that this player was going to do, they could fully block it still and then have the remainder of the game go on. But when Zen is pushing out like a 55 or 60 damage turn, you fully block that and still die. Yeah. Like that's the problem that they're trying to address here. There is nothing that can be done. It doesn't matter how the game worked. You could have had a perfect game up to that point, blocked everything, setting up your stuff like you're playing OTK Viserai or something. You're doing everything right. You're about to go off and they just go, okay, 60 you instead. Or they do it on like turn 2 and you're like, okay, cool. Sounds good. Like
yeah, exactly. It's a perfect example. Viserai, I've seen a lot of Hank, shout out to you, Hank, playing some sick Viserai games in the league that means nothing, where you're getting all this value each turn. You're defending, you're blocking, you're building up your rune chants, and then you're doing the big thing over and over again. Arclight Ascendancy, loads of rune chants going off. It can be either a big burst, like multiple bursts of rune chant energy and big attacks over the last couple of turns of the game, or it can just be one big pop-off turn. But before that, if Zen just 65 damages you, all that agency that you've built up, all that sort of synergy you've built up over the course of the game means absolutely nothing. Even in the league that means nothing, it means nothing. That's outrageous. And that should never happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exactly what you said there. So reflection and course correction. So where do we go from here? Firstly, it's time to update the design principles that will carry us forward into the next 5 years. While the initial principles were constructed to be our tent poles for the game's design, it's critical that we now broaden these principles to cover the game's development as well, guiding the two connected but independent functions that exist within the process of creating Flesh and Blood. So the design principles for 2025, the following design and development principles serve to guide us in the creation of game pieces using the fundamental building blocks of the Flesh and Blood game system, and they blocks are being action points, resource points, intellect, life, power, defense, and abilities. So interestingly put intellect on here, because so far we've only had one hero have less intellect than everybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, I've personally found that interesting too, because like that's a really interesting way, if the rest of the design decisions are being adhered to. I think that's a really interesting way to balance heroes that potentially have like an insanely strong hero ability, or you could have a hero that doesn't have a hero ability but has 5 intellect, like, or like has an active downside or something. Like, you could like kind of argue that that somebody like Vincent is a hero with 3 intellect but with an upside, because you have to banish a card from your hand at the start of each of your turns. Obviously, you still have access to the card in one way or another, but like you do lose it. You can't pitch it, you can't block with it, whatever. So in a way, Vincent is kind of a 3 intellect hero that has an upside, and I think that would be a really cool thing for them to explore more of. And I think they've just been a little bit scared because of that, 4v4 mentality that they were kind of talking about previously.
Yeah, exactly. And I think passive hero abilities and passive restrictions could also be quite good. Like, look at Emperor, for instance. Emperor can only run red cards in the deck. So, you could experiment with, this is a 5 intellect hero, but they're really, really smart, but they can't run any cards with 5 or more power in their deck.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. You've got so many macros that you could be like, okay, you've got 5 intellect or you've got 45 life, but you can't have 3 blocks in your deck. There's so many things that these principles could maybe draw upon to make heroes not only more interesting, but not sort of limited to the 4 cards versus 4 cards, or 4 versus 5 in the arsenal, or whatever. And there's a lot of things here: power, defense, abilities, life, intellect, resource, action points. Loads of those things could be designed around, and I'm sure we'll probably see maybe a collection of those things that we may or may not have mentioned already just then be experimented with. So so just going down here, so a couple more things on this before we get to the banned cards. So number 1 is class, talent, hero identity. So create heroes that embody the essence of their class, talent, and character. That's good. Cultivate and preserve a unique mechanical identity for each class and talent. Good to know. Number 2 is empower agency. So create a card pool and metagames where players have choices that allow them to meaningfully engage with the game plan of their opponents. So that's interesting. So maybe allowing everybody to run certain cards that can then attack everything that comes out, I guess, maybe in a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's that they're placing emphasis on like good sideboard options for specific game plans.
Yeah.
Where there's something like, I think something that would fit in with this would be something like Scour for Wizard, where it's like sometimes you just don't have the ability to interact with a bunch of rune chants or spectral shields or something like that, or the free Everfest auras. You have Scour, which then allows you to interact with them even if you can't attack them because they have Spectra or whatever.
Yeah.
Then just having meaningful ways that you can play into your metagame. And if somebody is playing, more consistently playing Illusionist, which plays on a different a different axis than a lot of other decks do, or playing into Wizard, where it's like, okay, well, this class doesn't have access to Arcane Barrier or runs like a lot of red cards naturally. Having ways to sort of offset that with something like Spell Void, I think is actually a meaningful decision that you can make.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're hoping to sort of push that as well. So that instead of just having straight up dead matchups, you can, if you want to, sort of make that more robust and have more play into traditionally bad matchups.
Yeah, exactly. Especially at larger events, or if your meta games get in a certain way, you can then tailor your deck to combat it to a certain degree. Whereas maybe you couldn't have done that before in class, perhaps. Just empowering agency. Victory is earned through the accumulation of many good decisions, which is what you were just saying there. Good decisions. Every card counts is the next one. So curate meta games that include archetypes where every card in deck plays a meaningful role in determining the outcome of the game. So that's good. Path to victory. So offer players strategies and card synergies that can create game states slanted towards offensive advantage, so that most games end with one hero being reduced to 0 life. Primarily disperse offensive advantages across multiple turns rather than in single bursts of output. Excuse me. Been talking a lot this podcast. There's only 2 of us this time.
Yeah, it's okay. After this, I can take over for you if you want.
Yeah, sounds good. You can go through the cards then, and then require combo and 1-turn kill decks to complete a meaningfully difficult quest to execute their fundamental kill turn. So the interesting part about this statement is it says examples include Viserai or Florian OTK, requiring many turns to establish the quantity of rune chants required to OTK, or a Kano player completing and memorizing their pitch stack over so many turns. So they're saying that Florian could be an OTK deck in this little bracket there.
I think that's to be expected, honestly. With his ability just being once it's online in like the second cycle, or if you're aggressively decomposing or whatever, to double all of your auras that you're making, all of your aura tokens, I think. I think that lends itself to a pretty OTK playstyle where you can just be super defensive and then all of a sudden have 30 rune chance and be like, okay. But yeah, I really resonate with what they're saying. I don't think that 1-turn kill OTK decks are inherently negative for a game, but for them, like saying Kano should still be able to kill somebody if you've gone through your whole deck and stacked it in a way that allows you to win. That is like the utmost display of skill for that playstyle of deck. I don't think that it should be the sort of thing where like they have to go through all those hoops just to give like a chance to kill. And of course, there's always going to be the games where it doesn't quite go to plan, and you have to sort of cobble something together. That's still fine. That isn't just being handed the win. I don't want to necessarily downplay the skill level of playing decks that require a lot of decisions, like Zen does, but with Kano, it takes a while. Naturally, through the course of the game, you have to like stack your deck, and you have to keep track of what you're doing, and like there's a lot that goes into it, instead of just saying, oh cool, I can block with my boots and I have this Art of War, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, I mean the people that I know or have interacted with that play Kano very, very well are extremely intelligent people. And they know the ins and outs of that hero just impeccably. It's crazy how much knowledge they have and memory of where the cards are and what they could potentially see and the percentages and all that good stuff. That definitely makes sense. But yeah, that's the design principles and the statements on that. And now we're going to go into the cards. So do you want to take over from this, just so I can rest my voice a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so yeah, we got this sort of pop up again. At this point, it was just about 2 hours ago. All of a sudden, we got notification that James White had posted, secondly, it's time to remove some cards from official tournament play that are root cause enablers of extreme offensive overlaps. The following cards are banned in CC and Blitz, effective September 9th. So in just about a week, next Monday. Art of War, Bonds of Ancestry in totality. So all colors of Bonds of Ancestry are gone now. Cash In, Orion of Mystic Tenants, and Tome of Aetherwind, Divinity, Fendel, and Firebrand. Which is a huge list of cards, realistically. And then the following cards are restricted in Living Legend effective September 9th. And it's Bonds of Ancestry. A deck can include one copy of a card named Bonds of Ancestry.
That's so funny.
Which is, I think, the first time that a non-majestic card has been restricted. I could be wrong. But
I think so.
For me, this then also means like you can run one red or one yellow or one blue. Usually one red. Those are the good ones. But yeah, like that's crazy. What was your first reaction to this as?
I was just like, okay, so Fab doesn't want us to read books or draw cards anymore. Which upon I saw Twitter before I saw the article, and that's why I made sure I retweeted Brian's post about don't read Twitter, read the article first, because it definitely makes sense. Because all I saw first of all on Twitter, on the socials, was Art of War's banned, Tome, you can't draw cards anymore. That's the first sort of story that I was fed, and until I read the article, and now it makes sense. They go through all of the fact of the reason why they're getting rid of these sorts of cards with the overextension of offensive decks, being that Flesh and Blood wants to be that the game of incremental advantage and make sure your decisions matter. Drawing cards to offensive decks, especially when they can cheat their cost, is what kills the game and what has killed the game for the last month or so for the people that are playing it against Zen specifically, and potentially other heroes in the future that might be able to abuse this sort of stuff as well. But yeah, that was my initial thoughts. Is LSS wants to ban card draw most of the time. But yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all for these.
Yeah, I generally and genuinely both.
Yeah.
I was about to try to mix them together in some weird portmanteau, but I do think that this change is ultimately good. It does feel kind of bad. Obviously, Art of War has been around for so long that it doesn't feel right to not have it, because it was printed in the second set ever, and so we've had access to it since basically the dawn of the game.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's not card design that limits what they can do in the future. And that's something that they do go into, that James goes into later on. But I think that drawing cards fundamentally is just the strongest thing that you can do in Flesh and Blood. And I don't think that's particularly controversial to say that.
Yeah.
Having access to more cards on your turn is crazy. So yeah, I think that this did need to happen. It does sting, but I think that things will be fine. And they're coming out with some pretty cool new heroes as well that have their own access to card draw. Like Acilio has that card that I've mentioned a few times. It's the 0-cost instant aura that the first time each turn you deal damage to your opponent, you draw a card. That's a crazy value engine now that there's no bulk card draw, or at least not a lot of bulk card draw anymore.
Yeah.
I still think those options are going to be really good. But yeah, anyway, to go into the first one and the biggest one, the justification, the context behind banning Art of War is Art of War has been one of the pillars of competitive play since its printing in Arcane Rising. This is the most consequential of the cards being removed from Classic Constructed and Blitz. True. Some people may ask why Blood Rush Bellow is okay while Art of War isn't. On the surface, they are both cards that cost 1 resource and trade 2 cards for 2 cards with a power buff as the typical payoff. The difference here is that Art of War being a generic has meant it has enjoyed the privilege of interacting with every additional card that has been printed since its original release in February 2020, compared to Blood Rush Bellow, which is siloed to only brute heroes.
Yeah.
Which I do agree with. I do think that this is the one sort of thing that I maybe slightly disagree with. Not like in full, but just that, especially as they sort of talk about some of the other cards that were selected, specifically Cash In and Tome of Firebrand. I think that Blood Rush Bellow being so good and being it's not generic, but it's generic brute. It's not a specific class or talent or anything like that. I think the the fact that they will continue to print cards for Brute. That is just, I think, a blanket statement that is true. They're going to continue to print cards that have 6 or more attack. They're going to print new Brute heroes that interact really favorably with that. So I think that it's a card draw card that you can do multiples of in a turn, and I think it'll only get easier. And still gives you a really big advantage and these really big aggro turns. So I don't disagree with what the intent of what they're saying is, but I agree with the actual application of it, if that makes sense. I do think that there is a universe, if they're willing to ban sort of proactively and say this might be a problem in the future, I think that Blood Rush Bellow is a card that does fit into that box as well.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about Blood Rush, though, to a certain degree, is the fact that they've kept this one there. Is obviously it's class restricted, so brutes can only do so much. They're not really action point heavy unless they roll scabbies or get not quickens, agilities, or all the other sort of action points they need to get. Normally are gated behind discarding cards of 6 or more power. So all of their action point economy is gated behind these other mechanics, which make Blood Rush not as good. Whereas Art of War is just, you can use it in any deck. You can then, some classes can actually cheat its cost through Tigers or Shadow cards or whatever, which is what they get onto in a moment. But Brute, obviously, on its face, Blood Rush Bellow can still brick your turn. If you discard a random card and it's your blue, for instance, and you draw into 2 reds, there's only so much you can really do with that, still. So, whereas Art of War in a ninja, for instance, is you're selectively discarding the card that you don't want after blocking for 1 the previous turn, drawing 2 cards for nothing, and then carrying on with all of your action point economy. So Art of War has been good in things like Levire and maybe just Levire with regards to the banish and stuff. But we never really see the other modes being used where you can block from your arsenal. It is literally just the draw cards, which is the issue, right? So
like I played. I think I talked about it last week, but recently I got to play some Chain in Living Legend, and there was a time that I didn't just do draw 2 +1/+1.
Oh my God.
There was a time that I was like, I do need to give something go again, so I'm gonna do that. But I can't think of a single time that somebody has used the you can defend, or even people that realize that that's an option for Art of War.
Defend
it feels
Arsenal.
like the baseline is always just draw 2 +1/+1.
Yeah,
that's like what the card does.
I mean, that feels like a hero ability to me. You got a hero that can defend from Arsenal. That sounds like a new hero to me. Which might have less intellect or whatever. Who knows?
But
yeah,
I do think that your point to Blood Rush Bellow being inherently more sort of randomized is actually something that is relevant, because like you said, if you have if both you can pare down your hand as much as you want in preparation for the Blood Rush Bellow turn, but if you have 2 cards remaining in your hand and it's a 50-50, you really need to keep one and you really need to get rid of the other one, and you hit the wrong one, it can still break your turn. I've actually faced that down before. I think it was actually against Ian. He had a Blood Rush Bellow turn and was just 1 resource shy of having like a really, really good turn, and instead had a medium Blood Rush Bellow turn. Whereas the turns with Art of War are always crazy. Just always.
Exactly. And then if you do have a bad Blood Rush turn, you sometimes have to crack the sash to be able to get the extra resource or whatever, so you're then losing value on that. So there's a lot of reasons why, the more you look into it, the reason why this class specific draw 2 cards, and it's a similar story as to why 3 of a kind was also not banned from this, because there's loads of restrictions behind it.
So the last part of Art of War here, sort of the biggest, I would say the most substantial bulk of the reasoning is in here. As the card pool has expanded, numerous ways to cheat Art of War's costs have emerged, such as shadow cards that can be played from Banished, Phoenix Flames returning to your hand, and Crouching Tiger is created in hand. Wow. This is the Art of War fodder that currently exists. There's a lot more valuable design space we want to explore in the coming years that Art of War would continue to exploit if it remained legal. Oh. Art of War has been a suppressive force that we have had to continually design and develop around. I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah.
While also being the most notorious card on this list for creating the kinds of offensive overlaps, extreme offensive overlaps, the updated design and development principles are aimed at curbing. I am fully unsurprised that they've had to consider Art of War when designing cards, even for like they were just saying, shadow cards that can be played from Banished. When I saw that you could Art of War Slithering Shadowpede and then play it as like a 1/7, and you could even give it go again with the Art of War if you wanted to do it that way. Yeah. I was like, wow, that's really strong. How many other Slithering Shadowpede-esque cards have been chopped? Or I guess at this point maybe tabled because Art of War exists and it would just be too strong of an interaction. So yeah, I'm wholly unsurprised by that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now another thing that I'm wholly unsurprised by, again, Bonds of Ancestry, notably went from you could play all copies of this card to you could only play red copies of this card to now in the strongest format, you are only allowed one copy.
That is hilarious. That journey is hilarious. It's like it was a full rare cycle, then it was a majestic, and now it's a one-off legendary that you can play in your living legend format.
Yeah, in the format where you can play against Starvo. You can play one Bonds of Ancestry.
That is funny.
Yeah, but yeah, they go on to say, we banned yellow and blue bonds on the banned and restricted announcement just prior to Pro Tour Amsterdam. We expected this to bring Zen down a notch while leaving him as one of the best decks for the Pro Tour, which he was. We've had Pro Tour Zen, and now it's time to bring Zen's power apex back to the rest of the field. As seen in numerous live stream games from Pro Tour Amsterdam and subsequent callings, Zen is regularly able to present offensive overlaps that are beyond the agency thresholds we have talked about in this article, enabled by Bonds of Ancestry Red, often without Art of War. So yeah, like completely outside of the sort of the almost toxic interaction that that cards that draw more cards might have. Bonds is not even like reliant on that to still be a gross card. No. And yeah, I think that's completely true and fair. Yep. We acknowledge that this is a tough pill to swallow for Katsu fans, but frankly, what Katsu did with Bonds of Ancestry was also beyond reasonable. I think that's less about Katsu and Zen and more just about Bonds. Honestly, I think that Bonds was definitely the issue, but they are pretty much saying that.
The thing is as well about the bond. The thing is with Bonds as well. It's just one of those sets of cards that you have to be like, if you're playing Ninja, this is just slam dunking your deck the whole time, and that is just like that's just boring, isn't it? You want to be able to play Ninja decks differently than that. I feel. So I'm not a Ninja player. I'm not a Ninja aficionado, but if I was, I'll be looking at myself thinking, Bonds again in this deck, really? I've played Bonds in, you have to consider it for every deck almost because it's that good. And same with the Ancestral Empowerment. That card as well as like you kind of have to build around it if you're playing combo because it's so good. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
I think, I was just going to say like Bonds of Ancestry is just straight up, like you're saying, you consider it for every deck because its inclusion is essentially free. Yeah. Because you also have like Descendant Gustwave, which is also just a free card. Like you went from these, you look at the combo lines from Welcome to Wraith or even from Crucible of War, and then look at Bonds of Ancestry. They opened it up so much that it has now just become you can do whatever you want and it doesn't matter.
One of the sad things though about this as well is that Dishonor just doesn't exist anymore, right? So that's a bit of a shame because that on hit is very unique. It's like it's probably one of the most unique on hits in the game where your hero just blanks for the rest of the game. I think that's really, really cool. So it's a shame to see that line go. Don't know how they're going to fix that. They will.
That's actually super funny that I forgot about it, that it requires Bonds of Ancestry. Yeah, you can only Bonds of Ancestry in Living Legend and you have one shot. Exclusively you have one shot and it needs to work if you want it to work. That's quite funny. But yeah, so Yeah, what Katsu did with Bonds of Ancestry was also beyond reasonable, saying that we will look to give Katsu fans new support in future expansion slots to fill the hole Bonds leaves behind. Again, hopefully just something that has the name Bonds of Ancestry so that you can Dishonor without it. Because I think that having access to Dishonor is a really cool play pattern. I think that it's enough of a threat for your opponent to have to consider that is hard enough to do. Like, it would be like saying, we're making it so you can only play 2 Phoenix Flames because Phoenix Form was too strong. And it's like, well, if you're able to get 3 Phoenix Flames, the Phoenix Form fully charged is like, it's a lot of hoops to jump through to get the card that draws 3 cards, there's a reason that they didn't consider it on the list here as a card that draws cards, because it kind of doesn't.
No, exactly, yeah. Yeah, at that point, you've put so much work into the card that allows you to draw 3 cards that the opponent's just going to block it anyway, or whatever you're doing is irrelevant up to that point. So we would have seen a lot more Phoenix Forms be played if it was a good card, but...
If it was any good, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that Dishonor being available is fine, and I think that it should still be available. So hopefully they do something like that. Bonds of Ancestry has also made its presence heavily felt in Living Legend for the same power level and repetitive play patterns reasons that have seen it removed from CC and Blitz. It joins the restricted list in Living Legend. And again, I think that's reasonable. I think that it's a pretty stifling card, like you were saying, for deck design purposes. Like, you just do the same thing. And that is an argument that is interesting in Living Legend, because when you have the ability to say this is the strongest possible deck, there is going to always be that, like, well, I should play this. Like, when you're playing Chain, it's like, I should play Seeds of Agony, I should play Plunder Run, I should play whatever. What used to be Art of War, too. But, but I do think that even in Living Legend, even with all of those powerful cards, I think that having full access to 9 copies of a card that should have been a Majestic is maybe a problem. So I don't disagree with this change either.
No, exactly.
Yeah. And then the next one, short and sweet, Cash In. Cash In is not currently a problem, but as gold becomes more prevalent, the cost to draw 2 cards becomes lower and lower.
Yeah.
We are banning Cash In before that time comes. And kind of like we were talking about previously, you have broadened my perspective on it a little bit, talking about like why Blood Rush Bellow is maybe inherently a little bit more high variance. I do think that this one, the cost of it is relatively low. You could always just play Crown of Dominion and then Cash In any deck, because both of those are generic. You could just slap them on any hero.
Yeah.
So having even easier access to gold means that it'll, like they're saying, it'll just be easier and easier to use it. So I don't disagree with that.
Yep.
Basically the same reason for Tome of Firebrand. And they even say like Cash In. Tome of Firebrand, not a problem right now. However, as the Draconic card pool grows, the quest to enable Tome of Firebrand only becomes easier. So yeah, just another sort of preemptive ban. Then we get into 2 that end up sort of asking some questions about card efficiency, which I think is an interesting axis to evaluate these on. First of all, we have... Actually, I'm going to talk about them in kind of a reverse order. I wanted to, but they reference it. They reference it in chronological order for this, so never mind. Orion of Mystic Tenants. It being legendary is indicative of how we were thinking about card draw back when it was designed in early 2023, which is reasonable. It draws 3 cards. There's ways to break parity on it instead of it being like... They're saying the original intent was 2.33 cards for... to trading in for 3 cards. Part of the problem with Orion is what 12 Petal Kasaya became, making it an easily enabled 2 for 3 card exchange rather than the original design intent of a 2.33 for 3. Saying that, we are now at the point where Orion, even limited to a single copy per deck, is simply misaligned with the updated design and development principles. I am interested to hear what you think about this, because obviously card draw, especially when it's as big as this, is a problem. I do want to say, just before I kick it over to you, this is the problem of having really impactful one-ofs in a game and in your deck. Again, to relate it back to Magic the Gathering, in the format Vintage, where anything and everything goes, except for the cards that are really powerful are restricted, similar to like what has happened to Bonds here. When you have individual cards that are extremely impactful, it then becomes just a waiting room of who sees their impactful card first. So like with Orion, it's like, okay, you can only play one, but if it's a mirror match and I see mine first, I am farther ahead than you are, period. I am doing better, and I am now further along in the game than you are. And it's the same problem in Vintage, where it's like, okay, I saw my Ancestral Recall before you saw yours. I saw my Black Lotus before you saw yours.
Yeah.
So obviously the resource system is different, but even though this was limited to a one of, it just makes Variance that much swingier.
Yeah.
So
See,
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I know. I don't see the problem with this right now, but obviously because it's just a Mystic card. And obviously you need to pitch a chi to be able to draw the 3. Otherwise, you're just getting 2. So it's hard for me to evaluate because I haven't played much Mystic Heroes, and I haven't really seen this card be played too much in like coverage and that. I haven't really seen it too much. But what they're saying with regards to the maths and their principles does make sense. But again, I think it's like similar to Firebrand and the other one. They're sort of protecting the game for the future reference rather than what it might seem at first glance right now, at least. So yeah, I agree with all of these so far. But yeah, I can't really evaluate the Mystic Tenets too much. I haven't really seen it being played or played it myself, to be honest. So.
Yeah, and that is reasonable, obviously, because of the fact that it is legendary. I think even the times that I've seen it in my games, it ends up just being pitch fodder. But it could also be that, because of course the first thing that they mention as part of the problem is referencing a card that Zen plays. So it could still be within that lens of like, Zen is a problem, Zen drawing cards is bad. And the fact that it does still sort of seep over to the other Mystic heroes, and if they wanted to print more, then it would be a problem there too. So yeah, it could just be that. But but then yeah, building on that, Tome of Divinity, like Orion of Mystic Tenants, Tome of Divinity has a design intent that you complete a quest, getting a card into your soul, to yield a 2.3343 card payoff. If you pair it with Vestige of Soul, you get a more attractive return of 2 for 3, which is the same as Orion, with additional flow-on value gained from Vestige when pitching cards drawn from the Tome. So you get like more of a return on your investment with Tome because you can play multiple copies of it. Compared to Orion, Tome of Divinity is generally a better designed card. The quest it asks of you is more meaningful, and the downside of Tome is higher, being a yellow with no defense value. The real strike against Tome of Divinity, however, is being able to play multiples in the same turn, often resulting in hopeless game states for the opponent. Yes, being able to chain these card draw spells is the worst part of them.
Oh yeah, disgusting. Especially if you've got the aforementioned Vestige online as well, where everything is then a pitching for an additional 1. You can just do insane things with Luminaris turned on as well. Being able to sort of come in with multiple other angels that then draw you 2 cards as well. The Herald of Eruditions and what have you, and the ally that also draws 2 cards on attack. It just becomes absolutely insane what you can do with that. So that definitely makes sense more to me, because I've seen it happen more often.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, the outcomes Tome of Divinity creates are often different from what other classes are doing with card draw. Typically, it doesn't lead to immediate combat damage overlaps, but rather the development of multiple auras that create board states that are overwhelming and unreasonable to deal with.
Yeah. The
game may continue to be played for several turns, but the game fundamentally ended at the time that Double Tome was played. Yeah. And that sort of plays off of just basically one of the core aspects of Flesh and Blood is that each turn, like they're saying, is supposed to be like 4v4. Like you have your 4 cards against your opponent's 4 cards. The way that Prism breaks parity on that is by creating auras that stick around. You don't usually have permanents in play in Flesh and Blood outside of now now more common, but still fairly rare cases. But yeah, like the amount of auras that you can put into play when you're drawing 4 cards or 6 cards and developing all of these on your opponent's turn because you have all these resources. They're already out of stuff, so they can't attack back and stuff like that. Like, it becomes insurmountable. You just then, like, you do this all on your opponent's turn because it's all instants, and then you, like, draw up on your turn, and you're like, okay, cool, now what, man? Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Works both ways as well, because if you just use your turn establishing your auras, you're essentially putting more cards in your hand anyway, and because you're establishing cards on field, which is then going to give you that incremental advantage, and then you go to your next turn, and then you're just doing it all over again, and you can play them at instant speed. So yeah, that makes sense that they're curbing that also.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
This one I was a little bit surprised about, but their reasoning makes sense. Tome of Fendel, the original draw 2 printed all the way back in Welcome to Wraith, in many ways is what card draw should look like. It consumes an action point, which is extremely relevant because everything else up to this point has not. They're all instants. You can play them mid. I guess Cash In isn't, but it has Go Again. So this one just straight up consumes an action point. It does not inherently have Go Again. But the problem is its generic status, meaning it can be played by heroes that are efficient at generating action points, such as Mechanologist and Lightning heroes, or are able to bypass action points altogether, such as Wizards. Being able to just banish this off the top with Kano, turning it into a draw 2 for 1 at instant speed, and turning it into an Art of War.
I would add...
It makes sense.
Yeah, I would add on this as well that Tome of Firebrand is extremely good in brute decks in Blitz, because you can just roll Scabbies and then draw 2 cards, gain loads of life, and then carry on with your actions.
Yeah.
It's more of a thing in Blitz, because in CC it's a lot more nuanced, but in Blitz that's one of the main things I've seen Reinhard do over and over again, is just capitalize on stuff like that. These are all banned in CC and Blitz, as we mentioned earlier, so I just thought I'd put a Blitz thing in there for once, because I don't really talk about it much, but I've seen it happen.
No, but that is totally true. Just having that action point economy just not matter on a 1-cost card that draws 2 is a problem. So. And then, of course, with Rosetta releasing new Lightning and Wizard heroes, Kano feasting on the new influx of new Wizard cards, and Dash.io receiving more support with their Armory deck in October, the true cost of Tome of Fendel, being an action point, becomes easier to bypass than ever before. And absolutely, I fully agree, 100%. And then we have sort of the same thing, but specifically for Kano, Tome of Aetherwind. Tome of Aetherwind has some reasonable qualities to it. It consumes an action point and has significant downside when it's drawn out of sequence, being a red card with 2 defense. It also ticks the class identity box of the updated design and development principles. That being said, both Kano and Acilio are easily able to bypass the real cost of this card.
Yeah.
Tome of Aetherwind sits at an awkward crossroads where it's either unplayable by Wizards that can't easily bypass the action point cost, being Icelander, Verdance Emperor, or Blaze, or it's used for the purpose of doing degenerate things, such as in Kano or Acilio. It's hard for a card of this nature to ever occupy the middle ground of doing fair things. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's not a card that you ever play for value. It is a card that enables pop-off turns. And then on the pop-off turns, it doesn't even have a cost, because you're saying, you banish it with Kano, and it's like, okay, cool. It was just a free draw 2.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah. Now for some fun ones too. Notably absent. Sort of asking the question before everybody else has a chance to. Why are 3 of a kind, Tome of Harvests, Tome of the Arknight, and Tome of Imperial Flame not being banned? 3 of a kind and Tome of Harvests both have natural limiters built into them that prevent multiple copies of themselves from being played in the same turn, and or impose constraints on the volume of cards that can thereafter be played. Agree with that. I want to ask your opinion specifically about 3 of a kind. What do you think about them maybe not weighting 3 of a kind as heavily as something like Art of War?
Yeah, well, the thing is with 3 of a kind, it's only been abused in Lexi so far, and the only reason Lexi was able to do that was because of the bow that she had access to, which was Voltaire, which allows you to refill your arsenal twice at instant speed. Azalea and other heroes at the moment don't really allow you to do that, or at least, because there are cards that will put things into your arsenal, but you still have to play them from hand, and Three of a Kind does not allow you to do that once you've played it. So it was only really the Lexi problem, which killed off Bullseye Bracers, which was another way of reloading things into your arsenal, in tandem with her bow and other things that made this card have its limelight when Lexi was still around. So at the moment, with the Rangers that are available currently, and the way that Rangers are starting to feel, I'm not sure if we're really going to be getting a Lightning Ranger again anytime soon that might be able to access putting 2 arrows in your arsenal with 1 bow activation, or 2 bow activations. Means that this card is still not going to see play even in the Ranger decks that we see currently, with being that Riptide and Azalea. So none of them have really sort of found a space for it so far. So I'm still waiting for this card to be broken, or used again, because I'd love to draw 3 cards and carry on with my turn. But Rangers just don't have that action point economy either. They want to be loading maybe 1 or 2 arrows a turn. So drawing 3 cards, it's similar to why when we evaluated Target Totalizer, when your next aim counter arrow hits, draw a card. There's only so much Rangers can do with the extra cards. You're just intellect penaltying yourself with the current decks. That's not even a penalty ding. But Lexi was the only one, to wrap this up, Lexi was the only one that could really use those 3 cards. The other Rangers can't right now. So yeah, I agree. I think that it's very... I don't know, it's very inspiring that they were able to print a card that on its face is so unbelievably strong in a game that, again, I was just harping on how drawing cards in Flesh and Blood is the strongest thing you can do. This draws you 3 cards for 1 resource with Go Again. Yeah.
And has a 1-line drawback. And that drawback stops it from being like even an auto include in Ranger decks.
Exactly, yeah.
like it is good sometimes.
Yeah,
So,
it's hilarious how 1 line of text or 1 restriction, as we were mentioning earlier, with the how you can design a hero around, they can't play 5 power attacks or less or whatever in their decks. You could add these things in, like draw cards with Go Again, but then you can't do something afterwards, or you can't do a thing afterwards, rather than just giving you the thing with no drawback. Maybe that's the way they can try and get around it going forward. But yeah, obviously the other ones as well are fairer as well that they mentioned here: Tome of Harvest and Tome of the Art Knight.
Yeah, I actually very much agree with Tome of Harvests. I think it is maybe one of the most fairly designed draw cards spells that they've printed. In that, it doesn't have the downside that Three of a Kind does. But in terms of something that you can do that draws you 3 cards, I think that this card perfectly aligns with everything that they've been saying thus far in this article, because it requires setup. You need a card in your arsenal. You don't get that just by accident. You have to have set it up in the previous turn. You then pay 3. So you pitch a card from your hand, an entire card, and you use those resources fully to then play this card from your hand. So you've arsenaled a card, you've pitched a card, you've played a card from your hand. You've used 3, you then draw 3. It's a draw. It's a +1 on a future turn, because in your hand you end up with 5 cards. But that changes just where the arsenaled card was. It puts it back in your hand, which then kind of makes it usable.
Yeah. In
sort of a roundabout way, oversimplifying what the card does. But I think that it is a totally fine draw 3 because of how much setup it requires. I see no issues with them leaving this card in place exactly how it is.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Yeah. And then, Tome of the Arcanite has enough positive variance built into it for us to be comfortable letting it stay. Agree. I have seen so many people whiff on Tome of the Arcanite and have it do literally nothing.
Yeah. I've seen it happen, and I've tried it myself. I used to love that card. I used to love it because it was a non-attacking Viserai that you play, and then you potentially draw 2 cards. Hopefully, it never happens. You're then left with nothing.
Yeah. You literally never draw cards off of this card, and I think that's fine because then sometimes if people want to play it and they high roll, great, absolutely.
It's the same with Sonata.
But yeah, just on its own.
Same with Sonata as well. You know, you have to have that 50-50 perfect split, and then all the cards that you've revealed that way go into your hand, and you're off to the races. But it doesn't happen that way. So yeah, hence why they're not banned.
I've seen an awful lot of people whiff on big Sonatas too.
Yes.
But yeah, and then Tome of Imperial Flame imposes a high deck construction burden, comes with defensive vulnerability, and most importantly, does not net cards outside of a few Phoenix Flame interactions that currently exist. Should there become more ways to return Phoenix Flame to hand or similar red fodder generators, it is possible that one day Tome of Imperial Flame may need to join the other forbidden books of Wraith. And just to remind myself of what it is, zero cost, draw a card if you are royal, instead draw 2 cards. You may pitch 2 red cards if you don't banish your hand. So yeah, like completely playable in something like the Emperor, where it is draw 2 that then pitches 2 cards. So it kind of like it forcefully generates you 2 resources and draws you 2 cards.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like you cannot afford to whiff on this card ever.
No.
It's like worse than rolling a 0 on Scabs.
Yeah, but that makes sense.
So yeah,
there's not obviously there's only Fire at the moment, and Fire doesn't care about this really. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, they're giving us a lot of prefix to okay, you know, we're considering these cards because you know there's other heroes in the future that could sort of. All the ones that have been banned, that we've spoke about already, they could be abused in the future. Does that hint that maybe we're going back to other areas, perhaps? But I think generally speaking, it is just the card draw. Get rid of it. Get rid of it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it will be, once the dust settles, I think things will be just healthier in general.
Yeah.
I am interested to see what then becomes the next problem outside of card draw.
Yes.
But we'll just have to see. Honestly, we'll just have to stay tuned. But yeah, and then the second last block of text, wrapping up. There are some big changes. These are some big changes. As I've written about in the past, our philosophy towards the banned and restricted lists is not only about addressing card interactions that create negative play experiences, but also as a tool that we use to actively manage our constructed formats. We acknowledge that following the changes today, there will be some matchups in Classic Constructed that have polarizing play experiences. For some of those classes, such as Guardian and Warrior, there are cards in upcoming products that we believe will help them wrestle back some points in those matchups.
Nice.
For Blitz, yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with this Guardian Mega Pack thing. I think that's kind of what they're alluding to with that. I don't know what they're alluding to with Warrior, just in general, I suppose. But yeah. Could be cool.
Yeah.
And then, for Blitz, we are taking some time to look at the format more holistically and consider a number of potential changes that could be implemented prior to the next skirmish season, starting November 30th. In the coming weeks, I will be discussing these changes and the bright future ahead of us in a podcast with senior game designer and lead developer Brian Gottlieb. Shout out Brian Gottlieb.
Nice.
We invite you to join us on the official Flesh and Blood YouTube channel. So yeah,
Cool.
I mean, we've had plenty of talks with Brian Gottlieb about game design and stuff. He is very good at sort of elaborating and providing context to design decisions that are being made. So I'm interested to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just wrapping this podcast up, then there's one last bit on here saying their legend lives on. So farewells are always hard. We know that there are many fans who really enjoy playing with some of the cards that are being banned today, particularly Art of War, which has been an iconic part of Flesh and Blood over the past 5 years. I'm sorry that a good thing has come to an end in Classic Construction and Blitz. However, the legacy of these iconic cards and your chance to keep playing with them lives on in the Living Legend format. And Living Legend is a format we are putting our support behind, as seen in its inclusion in Skirmish Season 9, currently running, and again in Skirmish Season 10, running later this year, in addition to its debut as a calling format in Chicago, December 14th-15th, as you mentioned on the podcast prior to this, the first Living Legend calling yet to happen. So all of these cards, despite the fact that they have been banned as a result today for Classic Constructed and Blitz, in this statement, obviously James is saying that they do value Living Legend, and you can still play with all of these ridiculously powerful cards that have broken the format apart, and as a direct result resulted in this statement from James and the changes that they've made. You can still enjoy those cards in Living Legend, so they're still going to be supporting that as a way to play with these old iconic cards, similar to how Vintage works in Magic. You can still play with the old stuff. But and then finally, Living Legend is the home for the most powerful heroes and cards created, and it is where you'll be able to continue playing with these iconic cards for many years to come. So yeah, that's a good thing about this game as well, is that heroes will come and go from the most played or competitive formats, being Classic Constructed and Blitz and what have you, but you can still play them in Living Legend, which is a nice sort of homage to that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the podcast this week. It's been an hour and 44 minutes of recording, which is pretty meaty content.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot to talk about, so and I think we did it in a pretty expedient manner, honestly, considering the length of that article.
Yeah,
but yeah, we got to talk about. We said basically every word in the article, and then also had pretty meaningful additions on on almost every paragraph. So I think that went really well.
Yep.
And also, just to double back to something that I said earlier, Bonds of Ancestry is the first rare card to be restricted in Living Legend. The others are all like ice cards and Starstruck and Warmongers.
Of course they are. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, like I said, that was a really good discussion. So thank you, Az, for hosting today.
Yeah, that's been good stuff. We kind of just took it upon ourselves to do one half each there, because my voice was just fading towards the half there. So I appreciate you grabbing the reins halfway through.
Of course.
But yeah, we will be back again to do it all over again next week, with Kel hopefully back and raring to go yet again. So it'll be interesting to see his thoughts on this next time. But yeah, so before we cap it off, where can people find you if they don't know where you are already, sir?
I'm Bill from the Spike Feeders and from the Living Legends podcast. You can find me on YouTube at FAB. At Spike Feeders Fab. I'm getting them mixed up. At Spike Feeders Fab, you can find me there for live edited gameplay content. You can also find me on social media at BillTSF. And I do want to give a quick shout out to what I tweeted out just before we went live.
Oh yeah.
In response to Peter, also known as Mask of Momentum, just saying "Bro WTF" to the banned and restricted announcement. I said, "Books banned. Good thing I never learned how to read."
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's one of the people I was thinking of when I was like, oh yeah, this is a great Kano player, because I think that's Peter Budinsek, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's his last name. That's
right. Yeah. So. Yeah, shout out to him for being a fantastic Kano player alongside Margin Bay as well, another one. But yeah, so that's been a great episode. Yeah, so I've been Az from Go Again Gaming, so Go Again Gaming AZ on the socials, and then Go Again Gaming on YouTube, and that's pretty much it. Arsenal step for me this week is that all my Warhammer Age of Sigmar arrived, so I've got so I've got a load of models to sort of delve into, which will take a long time for me to put together. But I've been researching how to do a slap chop method of painting. So people that are familiar with painting miniatures, leave a comment in the section below. But it's a quick and easy way of just making miniatures look good, where you don't really need to have necessarily much painting experience. So I'm going to be following those methods. But anything going on with you recently outside of this?
Nothing too crazy.
No.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some stuff that's been going on. Yeah, not too much. We've been filming a lot of Magic stuff still for a new set that's coming out, Duskmorn.
Yeah.
And this past weekend, we filmed some of the decks that we got to brew specifically for like new legendary creatures that are coming out.
Nice.
And there are a couple that we ended up putting together that are just actually like surprisingly fun. And yeah, that's basically what I've been up to.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I think I saw one card so far from that. No, two cards from that set I want to get from my demon deck. So one of them is like a tutor for a demon card. It's one black and one other for tutor for a demon. But if you have delirium, you search your deck for a card instead, which is pretty good. And it has, so on that card's flavor text, it also has the demon that I want to get as well, called Valvagoth, I think his name was. For the big 9-drop demon.
Yeah, that card's kind of crazy, honestly.
Yeah, so that looks pretty good. So yeah, that is the one. That's one of the decks that I continuously upgrade is my mono black demon deck, which is basically a combo deck, but can also function as a big 6/6 flyers combat damage if needed. Depending on what table I'm sat at, it can be a bit slow because it depends on whether I get the mana rocks and stuff, but. Normally in a 4-player game with people that I play with, the games are fairly battle cruisy anyway, so
that's good. Yeah.
But yeah, I saw
that matched up.
Yeah, I saw your game when you played Bristly Bill, and my God, it's Elliot, isn't it, who was sat on your right with the Zakama. Was it Zakama deck? That was a dinosaur deck, wasn't it?
Gishath.
Gishath, yeah, that was insane. What he was doing, on that turn. Holy hell!
Yeah,
oh, my God.
He says it in the game, and I think he has said it multiple times since. But like that's the best that he's ever hit off of Gishath's ability.
Yeah.
Up to this point, and probably since, or probably ever. That was like it was just the perfect confluence of having. A free person to hit for 7, and then also like 6 out of 7 really good dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nuts. That game is crazy.
Ridiculous. And then the Atali came in, didn't it, as well? And you could cast other spells from people's libraries, and yeah, that's fun stuff.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's pretty much it. Until next time, we'll see you all over again next week, and yeah, we'll see what we got for talk about next week. Cheers, folks.
Yeah. Have a great night.
Goodbye.